Good morning. Welcome to Tip Off this morning. Hope you guys are doing well. I think I've got the system all back up and running, and so therefore we have the video again today. The office is still a mess. It always is. Hope you're well. Got a bunch of stuff to talk on. We'll touch NFL to start, and then we'll hit mostly Jazz. Some quick thoughts on the NFL. The Peter King piece today in SI is a must read. It's really quite fabulously done, and it talks about the tie between Tebow, McDaniels, and Thomas. I don't know if you saw this, but McDaniels has been hired by the uh, Patriots for the rest of the playoff run, so they'll all be together. Pretty remarkable win. My joke is whether or not John Elway can trade Tim Tebow this week, because this will be his highest value he ever has in his career. But there's just no, he's proving he can be a viable playmaker in the NFL. There's too many, for me, numerical things going against him. Uh, Not throwing motion or anything like that. Just the unbelievable amount of 3-and-outs and the punts and times where the offense is neutralized for you to win consistently. But the only thing that gets complicated on that is that the personnel around him, he really has one guy, and that's Thomas, who's a big bona fide wide receiver. Decker reminds me of Ed McCaffrey every single time he catches the ball, but who had a pretty good career. But it puts that question mark. But on the other end, hey, those are big-time plays last night. That got you a win. The Giants are interesting to me. They played the toughest schedule in the NFL, or at least one of the toughest. They seem to me to be the most battle-tested. They have the quarterback who is not Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers, but is not that far off. They may have the best single personnel guys, that defensive line, that can change a game defensively. I wonder if they're worn out. I feel like they've played a lot of really big games recently, and we'll see. I do feel like they could be worn out. They really were pretty fabulous against the Falcons, but playing the Falcons versus playing the Packers is a totally different game. Otherwise, the weekend was somewhat of a dud. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. The New Orleans-San Francisco game is interesting because as good as San Francisco's defense is, I mean, let's say they hold the Saints down, 60% of their regular production. Saints are still putting 20, 25 points, 28 points on the board, and you wonder whether the 49ers can do that with Alex Smith at the helm and the way they play the game. They'll try to shorten it. Harbaugh will strategize well in that regard, and I do think Brees will struggle more than he has. They're that good defensively, but I think it's hard for me to envision that they can just completely shut down the way the Saints play and have enough offense to match. We'll talk about it more as the week goes on. Let's turn it over to the Jazz, who've won 4 in a row. Really, to me, somewhat stunning. The schedule has lined up. They've missed a bunch of key guys, but this team coming out of camp with some of the newness, with Tyrone at the helm, trying to put things together. I'm not sure I saw a 4-game win streak, just the concept of it, at any point this season. And the way they're doing it, I think is very interesting. Again, I've made this comment a lot. Let's remember we've played 9 games, so 7 preseason, I think now 8, so 5-3. 8 regular season games, 10 games. We should be 2 games into the season. And in the last 2 games, you're beginning to see how this team might play, what the rotation might be, who might get those minutes. What I've talked about all year about this team is, this, like, who's our best player? I'm not sure we actually know that answer. And 1 through 11, there's very little variation. Whoever the 11th guy on the roster is to the best player on the team, that margin is much smaller than for most teams. So I wouldn't be surprised if throughout the year we don't have the following kind of style to games, which is that our starting 5, whomever it is, may struggle a little bit because when the other team probably has a star or two, has that variation, probably has 1 or 2 matchups each night that can dictate a game. We don't really have any player who can dictate a matchup and dictate a game. And so therefore, when those starting 5, we may struggle for that opening 7, 8, 9 minutes of a game. And then as the substitutions start, Favors is probably better than every third big. Millsap circles big back in. He's better. Josh Howard has more experience than most guys. Earl's better. And for each and every substitution, we're just going to get a little bit closer. And as the game goes on, I think you begin to see us be able to do some more things. Cantor's better than most fourth bigs at this point. And so as you continue to kind of watch the games, I almost think that's going to be the pattern. And then the question is, as the game gets close, whether or not we can stay in games. And it's all and win them. It's almost a question that we saw on the road in San Antonio and in LA and in Denver of whether or not, and we stayed pretty close in those first quarters, so this system doesn't entirely match, but just whether or not, you know, we can stay in these games early and then kind of let our depth work through. Now, Denver's depth is actually better than ours. San Antonio's is as good. Those teams are really super. That's kind of the way I see it. And then I think the other thing that everyone's about playing time rotation. Some of this I think you got to mellow out about. You've got 11 guys that are pretty um, similar. So when somebody plays well, they're going to get minutes, and somebody doesn't play well, they're going to lose minutes. I know it's a dramatic concept. And at the same time, certain players, I'm not sure we can play this game of, oh, why is he off tonight? I mean, I think it's going to be a heyday for the negative fan who always wants to find something wrong every night, because I think this is the way our guys are right now and who they are as players. Very few of them dictate their matchups, and so it's going to kind of go to what works. I mean, Gordon Hayward against Rudy Gay. Gordon's on the short side of that matchup and is probably not going to have a very active night, or he's going to have to spend a lot of his time on the defensive end trying to get things going. And then, that's what happened. And then and he gets beat up in the third quarter, and it just doesn't work for him. And the next night he's playing Darrell Wright, who's barely an NBA starter, and he smokes him. Well, that's was Gordon's matchup to win, and he did it, and he had a fabulous game at Golden State. So I think you're just going to see a lot of that taking place each and every night. Josh Howard on some nights on the bench guy, and the way the lineup works in the game works. He's the guy. Earl Watson going up against Jeremy Pargo in Memphis is without really much of a backup point guard suddenly got the game rolling and dominated because he had a huge matchup advantage. Whereas in contrast to when I can't think of it off the top of my head, but when it was Andre Miller in Denver, who's about as good a backup point guard as there can be, that matchup didn't exist. So just, I think you got to look a little deeper. You're going to watch some matchups, see how different games are. And I'm not sure that many of our guys are ready. I mean, Paul's kind of who he is every night. And Al, if he has a matchup as he did against, the second team against New Orleans, he just kills him. Al's really impressive in the final 2-3 minutes of ball games. In close games, there's nobody in the league better, shooting a better percentage since the beginning of last year. He's one of the few guys who can get a post shot off. If he gets position, he's pretty deadly with it. And he hit a big, huge free throw line jumper again against the Warriors the other night. Nice to see Raja bounce back. He's been scuffling, and that's really what that story was. It wasn't, it wasn't anything. He was starting. I guess that's what got everybody all geeked out about him. He was playing about 12, 13 minutes a night. He wasn't returning into games. He was playing those two rotations, which, frankly, you had to have. We didn't have other guys who were taking those minutes. It really wasn't a complicated story. He hadn't returned and played a fourth quarter yet, and until he finally was playing well, they needed him in the matchup on Monte Ellis, who had in the two previous games against the Jazz, shot 10 of 31 against Raja Bell, and Raja got him again. And they used him. C.J. Miles is right now not playing well, not making smart plays, not in the rotation. These stories can go on forever, but I just don't think they're that complicated. And I got to tell you, I'm around the team every minute, and I could be oblivious, but I have not seen any of this veterans upset about minutes. Raja was never upset about minutes, never for 1 second. If you go back through any of those quotes, and I've talked to Raja 2 or 3 times about it, was there anything? And even when I saw Raja after the Golden State game and said to him, like, hey, dude, smile, great job. He's like, dude, I didn't have a problem. Why would I smile now? I said, because you played well and kind of proved to people you could get it done. He's like, I've been struggling, but there wasn't this middle finger at everybody approach from him. That's just not where he was at that time. The one thing I think is going to be quite interesting here and everybody's, I think, excited, we're in the playoff picture right now, is the West is loaded. And there's really New Orleans without Eric Gordon's not very good, and Golden State without Steph is not very good. And I don't know how long those two are going to last, and Sacramento's just terrible. Other than that, Phoenix is showing they're viable. Utah is showing they're viable. The teams that people thought weren't any. Houston is 0-5 on the road, and if you look at it, I think, I'm going to check it. Houston's losses, by the way, on the road are at Orlando, at Memphis with Zach Randolph, at LA, at the Clippers, at Oklahoma City. All right? Those are 5 losses that everyone in the league would have. So I wouldn't count Houston out yet either. What this means is that all of these teams are really quite good, and the margin between is going to really, that middle range is going to be 500, maybe even below to the 8th playoff team. And it's going to really, because all these teams can win a game up, all these teams can win a game against each other. It's going to be really tight, whereas some of the bottom teams in the East are just awful. The one that's going to be tricky is that Warrior pick. If Steph Curry doesn't get healthy, the Warriors are going to probably end up in the bottom 6, and we're going to lose that pick. And the Warriors know that. I mean, at some point, if Steph Curry's not right, they just shut him down and make sure they get their draft pick in a shortened season. So we'll keep an eye on all those things. But I think the thing on the West, as much as there's an excitement here to us, there's going to be games. You got to get the Cleveland game coming up here and the New Jersey game, but then the next sequence is Denver, the Clippers, Dallas, Minnesota, Toronto. You can take at Dallas, home against Sac, Portland, Clippers, at Golden State again, LA. I mean, these Western Conference games, and there's more Western Conference games than a regular season because of the way they weighted the schedule. There's just nothing going to be easy in any of them. I think if there are any, they're going to be easy. We just saw it. It was New Orleans without Gordon and at Golden State. Otherwise, these are going to be tough. I think there's still a lot of things that can take place, and 1 or 2 blips on the road, and you're going to struggle. The Jazz depth is going to make things really quite interesting. I didn't get a chance to talk about Cantor. I didn't get a chance to talk about Burks. I'll do that tomorrow. That is today's edition of Tip Off.